Abraham was a prophet and had seen God provide for him, but he remained without a child or land to call his own. So he cried out to God, "You have given me a lot. What's the point of giving me more unless I have a child to give it to?" God heard Abraham and took him outside. He told him to look up at the sky and count the stars. Can you even come close to counting them? Then God said, "I will give you as many descendants as stars in the sky. Furthermore, look out over the land. Look to the north and south, east and west. As far as you can see, this land will be for you and your children." Now Abraham believed God, but he still wanted some proof. So he called out, "O Lord, how can I know that you will give me all you promised?" God responded in an unexpected way. He told Abraham to go get a cow, a goat, a ram, and a couple of birds. He told him to kill the animals and cut the larger ones in half, laying each half a little bit apart so that blood could flow between them and form a pool. That's right, a pool of blood between the animals. Abraham did as God asked, but when he finished, he became terrified. You see, Abraham understood what was about to happen. This was a common practice in the day of Abraham. It was a means of making a contract, or cutting a covenant, as it were. They wouldn't write out a contract and sign it. That would have been meaningless to them. No, this has much more depth and significance. Often kings or leaders would make promises to each other in this way. They would cut the animal in two and allow the blood to pool between the two halves. Then they would walk through it, one at a time, and the blood would get everywhere, covering their feet and robes. It was a way of saying, if I don't hold up my end of our agreement, you can cut me in half and walk through my blood. Do to me as we did to this animal. Do you understand why Abraham was afraid? Here he was about to make a covenant with God and to seal it with his life. If he didn't hold up his end, he would be telling God to rip him apart and walk in his blood. Adding to the fear, he did not even know what his end of the deal was. He didn't know his responsibilities before God. He knew God's part. God was promising to give him land, descendants, and to make his descendant, the Messiah, a blessing to the world. But what must Abraham do? And how could he possibly make a covenant with God when he hadn't been told what he must do? When we keep reading the story of Abraham's life, God does eventually tell Abraham his part of the covenant. But he does so after this covenant ceremony. The Lord tells Abraham that he and his descendants must walk before the Lord as their God, and they must be perfect, without sin. Abraham, just like the rest of humanity, sinned, and not just once. How could God expect him to be without sin? It's impossible to be perfect. And why tell him after he had already done the covenant ceremony? Well, you will understand better if we go back to the actual story of the covenant ceremony. So Abraham had just finished cutting apart all the animals, and the blood is pooling between them. And he is growing afraid because he understands the seriousness of entering this kind of covenant with God. But before he walks through, God causes him to fall into a deep sleep. And this is what he sees. First, a bowl of smoke passes between the animals. This smoke is understood to be the presence of God. All throughout the Bible, God uses a cloud of smoke to indicate his presence. For example, on Mount Sinai, when he gives the law to Moses, the mountain is covered in smoke. Or when his presence comes down on the temple, it is in a cloud of smoke. Also, when he leads the Israelites in the desert, it is as a pillar of smoke during the day. So God was walking through the blood via a bowl of smoke. And now it's Abraham's turn. But instead of Abraham going next, something strange happens. A fiery torch passes through. What is this flaming torch? It is the presence of God passing through a second time. Just like smoke, fire is often signifying the presence of God in the Bible. There is Moses speaking to God through a burning bush, or the prophet Elijah taken to heaven in a fiery chariot. And the pillar of smoke that would lead the Israelites in the day would turn to a pillar of fire and lead them in the night. Smoke and fire, fire and smoke. These two were synonymous with God's presence. So Abraham and God made a blood covenant. But God walks through twice. Once to say, I will uphold my promises to you and your descendants. You will have countless descendants and a land to call your own, and the Messiah will come to bless the world. And a second time, God walks through to say, I will uphold your responsibilities to me. I will make you and your descendants perfect. When you fail to be perfect, I will condemn myself to death in your place. And when you walk through my blood, I will uphold our covenant and will make you perfect. The amazing thing about God's covenant with Abraham is that both sides of the deal are fulfilled in the Messiah. The Messiah came to be a blessing to the world, and that blessing is taking our punishment when we have failed to be perfect. He was perfect when we couldn't be, and his body was broken for us. Upon the cross of Christ, we see God dying in our place, fulfilling the covenant, and through his blood, we can receive the promised blessing.